Hello and good morning, everyone, and welcome to our free workshop day of the BC Tourism and Hospitality Conference. My name is Carissa Bergeau, and I'm the Executive and Board Liaison with the BC Hotel Association. I'm coming to you today from Vancouver, BC, and as such, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that we are on the traditional, ancestral, unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. It is now my pleasure to introduce Maya Lang, who is the Vice President of Global Marketing for Destination BC. So welcome, Maya.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. And good morning, everyone. My name is Maya Lang. I'm the Vice President of Global Marketing at Destination BC, and I too am honored to be joining you from the territory of the Coast Salish people, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. At Destination BC, we've been thinking a lot about how to prepare for the shifting digital future. And more so now than ever before, we're trying to figure out where to put that stake in the sand in a few years from now. And that will help us determine where to focus, where to make shared investments on behalf of the tourism industry, and also how to design industry learning programs that will benefit tourism organizations now, but also for the future. So in light of this, I'm delighted to be able to present our next speaker, John Ounpuu from Modern Craft. We asked John to prepare this presentation on the shifting digital future because of John's deep expertise in this space. He's not only a seasoned strategist, he's also the co-founder of Modern Craft, which is a marketing consultancy focused on strategy and operations. But he's also helped many global brands address adaptation to the changing digital world. Before co-founding Modern Craft, John was vice president for Blast Radius, a digital agency started here in Vancouver and has gone global. And for those of us that have been in this space for a while, we know that Blast Radius was truly one of the groundbreakers in the space. And at Blast Radius, John spent a decade guiding brands like Nike Golf, Nike Jordan, Microsoft, Starbucks, and EA as they adapted themselves to the challenges of the increasing digital world. So we have about 45 minutes together, and so I'll hand it over to John now. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to put them in the chat or in the Q&A. If we can't get to them today, we'll share answers via our industry newsletter, or you can always email us at covid19response@destinationbc.ca. So with that, I'll hand it over to John. Thank you.
Hello. Apparently I can't start the video because the host has stopped it. But hi, everybody. Okay, I think I'm in business. Can everybody see me? Hi, it's great to be here. Thank you, Maya, for that introduction. It really is a pleasure to be speaking to all of you today. I've got some slides and I'm going to dive right in. Right, so digital. When Maya and I first started talking about this topic, we both agreed that the word digital kind of made us squirm a little bit for a couple of reasons. First, it's so ubiquitous now. We all live our lives in the digital and physical world at the same time, all the time, and they're blurred together, and really it's become such a ubiquitous part of living, it's hard to take it apart and just look at it separately. The second reason is really more to do with the marketing world in particular, where I live, and that is when you start talking about digital to marketing folks, there's always a risk of the cart kind of getting switched with the horse a little bit. As tremendously powerful as digital technologies can be for marketers, I always, start with strategy. I believe that, really it's about what you're trying to achieve. What are your goals and objectives? What makes you unique in the market? What are your priorities, strengths, and weaknesses? And from there, choosing the right digital tools and tactics. So when you start talking about digital in absence of that strategy conversation, it can be a little tempting to put that cart before the horse. But despite these squirms, we felt like the topic was definitely worthwhile and worth talking about today for a bunch of reasons. I mean, one, I'm sure you're using digital technology already. I'm sure you've spent some time and money and effort in investing in different technologies and channels and maybe talent and training. So it's already a part of your business, I'm almost certain. Of course, travelers are living in the digital world just like the rest of us. When they're able to start booking travel, they're going to probably do it online. So it's important for this industry. It's also just tremendously powerful and useful. And then the last thing is that there are really some interesting shifts happening right now in this digital landscape, particularly right at this moment, that are probably worth looking at and thinking about. And that's my goal today, really, is to take you through some of those changes and kind of help you process them and make sense of them a little more. So my presentation will have two parts. First, I'm going to overwhelm you, so that's a warning. But then I will reassure and encourage you also. So don't leave halfway through, or you may have some lingering anxiety. So make sure you stay for the reassuring part. So the first bit of overwhelming I'd like to do is around just the general context. So the internet is a broad and vast creature that touches all elements of modern life and many elements of the marketing world. But where a lot of the changes are happening right now is in connection to data-driven digital advertising, this one little corner of the bigger landscape. And in marketing terms, we can place that part of the landscape also on the funnel, the marketing funnel. Most of you maybe have seen this before, some maybe haven't. It's an old idea, a very useful one. I think the basic concept is that you start building awareness, and as you move down the funnel, you less people stay with you, but those that do get closer to making a decision and taking an action. So you start broad and you get narrow, and then there are tactics to help people move down the funnel from one stage to another. It's not that linear, obviously, in real life, but it's a useful way to think about it. And right in the middle lower part of the funnel is where the data-driven digital ads kind of play. And that's kind of interesting because when you use the word advertising, traditionally that happened up at the top, right? There was a big, broad awareness building back in the old Mad Men days. But not so now. Of course, back then when TV was still king, there were still another kind of ads that we used to get, which were often included a 1-800 number and encouraged you to call now, act now, 3 easy payments, etc. So, and those we call direct or direct response marketing. And really, so modern online data-driven digital ads are essentially an evolution of that direct response type of advertising. So these are ads designed to drive a specific action in a very direct way, and they're, especially online, highly targeted. When they were on TV, they were targeted in a different way, which was like they were on late at night and you were sleepy and your guard was down. So that was a form of targeting. But there, of course, that targeting is much more sophisticated these days. It's also a $300 billion business, online advertising. It's not as big as the global travel tourism business, but it's big, and it has grown by leaps and bounds in the last decade. This stuff is really popular. I mean, there's the reason it's a growing industry is that marketers like it a lot. Compared to other forms of advertising, data-driven digital is inexpensive. It's also very measurable, and those measures can show you very clearly the path of conversion. You can see how the money you spent on the ad led, in some cases, to a sale or some kind of other tangible action. Often, and you can see it doesn't work every time, but it works enough that the inexpensive cost delivers some ROI. And then the last thing is by tracing that ad dollar all the way through to an action, it allows marketing folks to deliver proof of impact to the business. Like, the thing we did, it worked, and the dollars you gave us to spend turned into some kind of action, which is something marketers in the old days never could do. There's an old joke about, half, or old statement really, about half my ad budget's a waste, but I don't know which half. It's still kind of true, but in this world, it's not. So that's tremendously attractive to business owners, to marketing people, to know that there's proof that what they're spending is delivering results. But that zone of the internet is also tremendously volatile right now. It is there are two big issues that where you see that volatility in particular. One is privacy, and the other one is societal impact. So I'm going to talk about both of those today. And then I'm going to talk about a third topic, but I'm going to zoom out for that one beyond just the data-driven advertising and talk about this idea of digital transformation. So that's the three kind of things I want to hit. I'm going to start overwhelming you about privacy. That's where I'm going to start. So there's an inbuilt tension when you think about online advertising and privacy. The way these ads work is they learn things about you, and then they use those things to target you, things that you're likely to act on or find relevant. It's not a inherently bad thing as a consumer. I think sometimes something really relevant could be great. I could appreciate not being shown an ad for something that I really don't care about. But it also can easily cross that line into annoying. And there's a tension there, right, between being relevant, being annoying, or even being invasive. And I think in recent years, the world has become more aware of that invasive side of things. And really, there's been kind of a lot of criticism. It started in the kind of academic space, and it's moved into the media. You can see some of the headlines and book titles here: surveillance capitalism, high tech is watching you, you are now remotely controlled. So it started in again, academia and media, and now it's kind of trickling down to the general population. Some recent research from Pew, this is a couple of years old, but 72% of Americans feel like most of what they do on their phone and online is being tracked. And 81% feel like that tracking, the risks of that tracking outweigh the benefits, right? So essentially, these are tools, and it really comes down to how you use them, how the degree of care and respect with which they're used. But I think it seems like we as marketers have kind of pushed things a little too far towards the annoying zone. So why is this issue coming to a head now? It's nothing new, but why now? So there's a few reasons. There's more data than ever, so in a way the prize is greater, and what you can do with it is more tempting than ever, more attractive than ever. Government regulators have also in recent years started to take a real interest in online privacy. For example, here in Canada, just in December, Bill C-11 was tabled, which directly touches on this issue. But the real driving force, I believe, behind the current upheaval in online advertising is that the titans of the technology world have decided to weigh into this and take sides. And these are powerful, influential people. And when they butt heads, the ripples tend to be felt broadly. This started early 2020 when Google announced that they would phase out support for third-party cookies within their Chrome browser by 2022. And this triggered some panic in the marketing world. Sometimes people have referred to it as the cookie apocalypse. As you can see here, Cookie Monster is definitely concerned. Quick explainer on cookies. This may be something you all know already, but I'll just spend a minute on it. Essentially, there are two kinds of cookies, first party and third party. No one knows what happened to second party. They've disappeared. There's a search party looking for them. But first party is, these are cookies that are stored on your computer, and they're stored and used by the site you visit. So it's a one-on-one thing between you and whatever website or service you're using online. They remember things about you so that when you come back, they can use those things to make your experience better. That's first party. Third party is, as you might imagine by the name, these cookies are being stored, the data is being stored and used by third parties to track your activity between and across different websites. And so third-party cookies are really the ones that are used in online advertising for targeting and retargeting and tracking. So Google recently, actually, this is just March 3rd, so last week, have kind of doubled down on their anti-tracking stance, their pro-privacy tracking stance. So what they're saying now is that they will not build a replacement for cookies that is an individual level tracking mechanism. Now, this was, and that's in the products that in their own activities and in their ad products, and they have many ad products. They are the largest ad network in the world. So it's really a signal that that individual level tracking is starting to go away. Meanwhile, another tech giant, Apple, this is their futuristic donut-shaped headquarters. They have made some recent announcements also around not allowing app developers to track users of their apps as they move in across different apps and around the internet, which was something that they could do. So you can see Mark Zuckerberg there in the image. Definitely Facebook this is a blow for Facebook. And recently, Tim Cook threw some real shade towards Facebook, as the saying goes. He never mentions them by name in this entire speech, but it's very clear who he's talking about. So he's saying, technology does not need a lot of data stitched together across all these websites to succeed. Advertising existed before and worked without this. And then he talks about the path of least resistance is rarely the path of wisdom. So then the final one, just to strike a blow even deeper, if a business is built on misleading users and on data exploitation, it deserves reform. So Tim's coming out swinging, definitely pro-privacy. I mean, all of these companies, what's motivating their attitudes? You could say it was a deep belief in privacy. I think there's a lot of self-interest in there too, obviously, but whatever the reason, the impact is kind of the same. And then that leaves Facebook. So Google are the #1 largest ad network in the world, and Facebook are #2. As the old saying goes in the tech world, if you're not paying for the product, then the product is you. Facebook really are a prime example of that phenomenon. But they're not taking this lying down. They've launched a big PR campaign. These images are 2 full-page newspaper ads that they took out in the New York Times, Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal. The first one positions Facebook as standing up to Apple on behalf of small businesses everywhere. And then the second one positions them as standing up to Apple on behalf of the free internet. Bit of a stretch in my view to think of Facebook as champions of the free internet, but that's their story, and they're trying to fight back. So there's a real scrap going on here for sure. What is the upshot in the industry? This is where really I think what matters. So we're seeing definitely some folks are trying to develop alternate methods of tracking individuals between websites. Although I think the announcement from Google last week is a real headwind for those folks. There's some methods being looked at involving hashed or anonymized email addresses, but I personally think the sun is setting on individual tracking. We'll see though. But really, a big upshot is that everyone now wants first-party data because it's the third party that's going away. First party is still viable. So everyone's interested in essentially building stores of data about their customers and prospects. It seems more attractive and more critical than ever. And as a result, we're seeing, maybe on some media sites you've noticed, it's like they want your email address to read an article. Everybody wants your email address basically because they are building these first-party data stores. Since third-party isn't so viable. So if you haven't already, I would suggest considering a way that you can bring email into the mix for your customers. Obviously, in a way that has value for them, or else they won't pay much attention. But it's worth thinking about. The other thing is that good old-fashioned contextual targeting is back. So that's the old form of ad targeting, which was basically choosing the media outlet based on who reads it and how that audience profile matches the audience you want to reach. Just good old-fashioned, I want to reach people that watch this TV show or read this magazine, so I'm going to put an ad there. That's kind of having a renaissance right now. Google are talking about their own new solution. They have this concept called the privacy sandbox, which involves anonymous cohorts of people. So it's not individual level, it's groups or cohorts that have shared browsing habits, and they are pooled together and used that way anonymously for targeting. But personally, as much as I enjoy a good sandbox, I think my preferred children's playground equipment metaphor here is more of the seesaw or teeter-totter, because I think the question here is really one of balance. Going back to that tension between relevant and annoying, I think what's happened, honestly, is that this stuff was so attractive to marketers and so effective that we've kind of been guilty of some short-term thinking and really drifted too far into the annoying side of things and away from relevance. So I think it's a lesson about respecting our audiences and remembering that good marketing comes from the place of respect. And I like this quote from Kat Warboys at HubSpot. She basically thinks this is a good thing. The cookie apocalypse is that it's a reminder that we need to do right by customers and respect the data, and that if you're chasing short-term gains at the cost of long-term trust, then it's probably a bad business strategy anyways. And those companies that are protecting users' data and using it thoughtfully to make those customers' lives better, those are going to do well. So I think it's just a matter of getting the balance back and course correcting. I don't think this stuff is going away. I think it's evolving. I think it's still a useful part of the marketing mix for most brands, but it really is around this mindset of how the tool is used. Okay, I'm going to move to my second overwhelming topic now, which is societal impact. So things are bad. Basically, things are bad. The other thing that, besides privacy, the other concerns around online advertising are connected to the way that data-driven targeting is getting wrapped up in things like hate speech, online misinformation, and essentially the collapse or near collapse of democracy and Western society. So, not good, not a good thing. Quick explainer, I think, before, just to give some context, I want to explain this word programmatic. It's pipes, not people, doing the media buying. So the reason this stuff is so cheap is because it's automated, right? There are algorithms that buy and sell ad media. And so what happens is when you take the person out of the equation and leave it up to algorithms, and often it's like not a single algorithm, but many kind of strung together, your ads can end up in weird places. So this is just to show you a view of the digital landscape, a different view. This is an eye chart of all those little things are logos of marketing technology companies, companies that sell software to marketers. And so this corner where the circle is in the top left, that is the ad tech world. So that's where all those pipes are coming from. And there are a lot of them, and they're fairly intricate. I love this infographic because it really tells a story. There are 8,000 software companies on it right now. Back in 2014, there were less than 1,900, I think. So it's been a crazy last few years. But yeah, so the issue now is when you have an algorithm placing ads, is your ad in a safe place? Is your ad in a place it should be? It's kind of the question is, do you know what your brand is doing when you're not looking? It's kind of like being a parent of a teenager. Who is it hanging out with? And the answer has been an unpleasant one for recently even. I mean, I think brand safety has been talked about for the last 5 years or so. We've made a lot of strides, but in the recent US election, the cracks are still showing. One study found that over 1,000 brands ran ads alongside election misinformation. And those are some big brands. We saw this New York Times article here, talks about Home Depot. Their shareholders are pushing back and saying, hey, I don't think we should be, funding this kind of content. And yeah, so it's bad in a couple ways. One, it's a bad look for your brand. It places your brand in a place where you probably don't want to see it. And the other thing is it takes your media dollars, and actually they end up funding this harmful misinformation, which I don't think you want either. So just to point out a little part of that article about New York Times, they mentioned Facebook. Home Depot advertises heavily on Facebook. The reason they mentioned Facebook there is requires another quick explanation that many of you probably already know, but I will do just for a moment. Organic versus paid reach. So when social media sort of started 10 plus years ago and brands first got involved, it was this idea that your fans or followers would follow you directly, and they would see your content, and there was no paid media there. It was known as organic exposure, organic traffic. These days, only 5% of followers see things that your brand posts organically. There's going to be some paid promotion involved, which is, again, why Facebook is the second largest ad network. So even though we may think of them as social media, it's all organic, it really isn't the case. They are an ad company. Now, this all came to a head in the summer of 2020, in July, when things were heating up in the US around racial inequity and racial injustice. And Facebook was a place where a lot of those the ideas were spreading that were causing some of the problem. And there was a boycott. There was a boycott where over 400 advertisers basically paused their Facebook advertising, including Instagram, also owned by Facebook, for the month of July. And this was organized by a group of US-based civil rights advocates who created an organization called the Stop Hate for Profit campaign. It's really still going, actually, but and basically the purpose of this is to hold social media companies accountable for hate on their platforms, and ask them to prioritize people over profit. But I think, as whether this was effective or not, what it also did is I think it made a lot of marketers and advertisers kind of really reckon with their own role in this crisis. Because, it's our appetite for effective ad targeting that has led Facebook to develop these tools that can be misused and can be used to spread other ideas, unsavory ideas. So in a way, we're connected. It's a reminder that the marketing and advertising industry does not exist on an island, right? The things that we do can ripple out into the wider world. And it's like we find something we really like, and then there's a side effect that we didn't know about. In this case, hate speech, disinformation, and societal collapse. I've been ranting about this for a few years. This is a piece I wrote for the Globe and Mail in 2018 on this topic, when there was another much smaller boycott happening. The point of that article, and my point today, isn't to kind of shake my finger at marketers. I'm a marketer myself, but it's just a reminder that I think we have to remember that our media investments they shape the world around us, right? They have ripples beyond our campaign goals for the quarter, and we have some responsibility to bring some care and thought to those media investments. Okay, last overwhelming before I get on to the more positive side of things is around transformation. So I've been talking about this corner of the internet where data-driven digital ads live. Obviously, it's a much larger landscape. The whole thing is changing actually all the time, which is overwhelming. It can be, right? It's very hard to keep up. It's very difficult to keep up with all these changes and all these opportunities that are tied up in these changes. And this chart is created by a guy called Scott Brinker, who created that infographic I showed you of the marketing technology landscape. he looks at this space, and he's worth looking at. His writing is quite good. But his point here in what he calls Martek's law is that there's this variance in speed of change between organizations and technology. Technology is always going to be changing faster than we as organizations can. And that this is essentially what he calls the greatest management challenge of the 21st century, which I think he has a point. And keeping up with that, closing that gap, that's really what digital transformation has come to mean, although it is a slippery term. For example, Wikipedia, their definition is all about the adoption of digital technology, whereas others like Harvard Business Review and Deloitte say, no, it's about strategy. It's about a mindset. It's not just about buying and using a bunch of tech. Whatever the definition is, it's big business. This is from a few years ago. This is 2018. Forbes did a study where they found that $1.3 trillion were spent on digital transformation that year, 1.3 trillion with a T, and that 70% of those projects failed to meet their goals, right? Ouch, that's an ouch. But it's also not that surprising when no one even really knows what transformation is, and when, as you saw from that graph, it's just so inherently difficult. I mean, and of course, people still do it because nobody wants to feel left behind. Nobody wants to feel irrelevant. No one wants to miss the boat. And so, we keep trying, right? And this is true in your industry, right? There's, even as we speak, there are new technologies emerging that offer lots of interesting opportunities for travel and tourism. You have this, hey, what if I did an AI-enabled virtual assistant to help my visitors and my guests have a richer experience, or to steer them to the right experience when they're exploring? What can I do now to deliver a more personalized and therefore more relevant and more memorable customer experience? Heck, I've got this 5G mobile coming, super fast mobile internet. How can that impact the traveler experience? So lots of opportunities, right? The prize is real. It's not like I think anyone feels comfortable throwing up their hands and just giving up. But it's hard, right? It just is hard. I mean, so much so that so this pre-pandemic, Destination BC, they did some analysis and they found that only 15% of DMOs in BC are where they need to be digitally, right? That's looking at things like website usability and performance, social media, search engine use, various things like that. So only 15%. Okay, so that sounded kind of grim and daunting. So now I'm going to turn things around and tell you that you got this, because I really think you do. Let's reassure and encourage. Let's do that now. Let's do that. See, beautiful, calm waters and a lovely sunrise. Let's keep going on this topic of transformation. So how does a pandemic affect transformation? It's a question. I think this cartoon, I'll leave it up for a second, kind of answers it quite well. There comes the wrecking ball. This also, I like this quote here from Yuval Harari, who's a leading author on kind of the fringes of change and how the world's changing. He makes this point that when the coronavirus circulated through the physical world, many of us shifted our lives to the virtual world where the virus couldn't follow. And we've seen this. I mean, we have seen this. This is a chart from McKinsey. They found that in the first 3 months of the pandemic, the e-commerce penetration in the US leapt up to the point of looking like 10 years of growth in 3 months. So just a hockey stick. Now that's e-commerce, but in more broad terms, another study from Trulio, they interviewed a lot of marketing leaders, and they found that digital advancement, like basically 6 years, and this was about 6 months in. So 6 years and 6 months. So just again, rapid acceleration of adoption. because everyone knows that that's sort of where our lives have gone even more deeply as we become physically isolated. We become digitally more deeply connected. All of this, so much so that Scott Brinker, our pal Scott, he went back and actually edited his chart. And it's a signal of hope, right? He said, hey, guess what? It's possible for us to speed up. That's been proven by what's happened since this pandemic hit. Maybe things aren't quite so dire as I thought. Sure, it takes a cataclysmic event, but we have been able to adapt. I think I like this headline from the article where he released that chart. It's taught us more agile than we thought. And I think that's true of most of us. I think that's probably true of all of us. And that's probably true of you. You're probably more agile, you personally and you as an organization, than you might have thought. And you've probably already learned that in this last year. So what are some tips for moving forward and thinking about this whole keeping up question? First thing I'll say here is shift your vocabulary. I really hate the word transformation. It really bothers me for a few reasons. Well, first I'll show you, again, this is one of my, you guys get all my rants today. I wrote an article about this one back in 2019. So why do I hate the word? It implies an ending, right? So it's like, okay, we're done. We are transformed. Boy, that was great. I feel good. How do you feel? It also implies dramatic change, right? One day you're a caterpillar, next day you're a butterfly, you're unrecognizable. I don't know if you remember from science class, what happens in the cocoon when the caterpillar changes to a butterfly, but they kind of turn into like this liquid mush. I mean, it's messy. And that also sounds scary, right? Like no one wants to turn into liquid. I don't want to turn into liquid mush. So it's just needlessly intimidating. And of course, it also sounds expensive because it is, or it can be, especially when you think of it as something big and monumental. So I think I much prefer the word adaptation, which is why I've given it this rainbow typeface treatment. I love it because it's more about an ongoing practice. It's not intrinsically gigantic and intimidating. Essentially, you're changing when it's advantageous, not just for the sake of it. And you're responding to changes that matter. So it's much more digestible. Think of it as evolution, not a revolution. That's a healthy mindset. So tip 2 is chart your own path. I think it's very tempting to look around in the industry and look what everyone else is doing and think, I need some of those. I want that. We got to do that too. I think it's a little bit of that is okay. You want to look at the competitive landscape, sure, but take a look in the mirror. Spend more time looking in the mirror at who you are as an organization, what you need to accomplish, what your natural strengths are, what your weak spots are, what your strategy to navigate the future is, all of those things, and then start from there. Your strategy, your goals, your strengths, your weaknesses. An example from my agency life previously, I worked on the Nike golf business, as Maya mentioned. When they were trying to understand what digital could mean for them, they were not looking at other golf brands. They were looking instead at the connection between what they were about as not just any golf brand, but Nike golf, a little more athletic, a little more dynamic, and the kind of golfers they wanted to reach. What is at that intersection there that we can find? They ended up building this app called Nike Golf 360. You could take a video of your swing and upload it and get it analyzed. You could track your game. And this was for a while the number one golf app in the App Store. It has since they've changed their strategy and it's since gone away. But for a few years there, it was number one. So it came from their strategy, not from looking at competitors. Is the point. Tip 3, start small, right? Again, big and scary isn't good. I also worked on the Starbucks business when they were just getting into this in the late 2000s. I remember someone saying in a meeting, you can't buy a cup of coffee online. Why are we doing this? Of course, they've come up with like dozens of ways to buy a cup of coffee online since then. But at that point, they were starting small. They were getting on Twitter. This is, by the way, what the Twitter logo looked like, in 2009 is, I think, cuter. Back when it was a cuter thing instead of anyway, we won't talk about Twitter now. They had an online version of the in-store suggestion box where you could take ideas to make the experience better, and they collected those. and they were just building a young team, right? They were just putting a team together and trying to figure out what that meant, taking small steps and learning as they went. And then as the years went by, they emerged as a digital leader significantly. I mean, this article from 3 years ago talks about they're processing more mobile payments than Apple or Google every day. But it wasn't overnight. It wasn't this big, daunting transformation mission. It was a series of small steps where they were learning and course correcting and evolving. Speaking of starting with small steps, this is a free online tool that my company Monocraft created at startingpoint.app. It's just a little quiz you can take that helps you figure out where maybe you would want to start. Start small. Tip number 4, think of digital as a mindset more than anything, right? So it's not about tech. It starts with a mindset, I believe. It's about being open-minded, about being agile, comfortable with change. And the last one is customer obsessed, which is super critical. When you're trying to keep up with just technology, trying to follow the pace of technology, that's daunting and kind of impossible. But when you're trying to instead follow your customer in this digital world and what they need and want, that's a much easier proposition than keeping track of every new piece of tech. And it's much more impactful in my belief too. Okay, societal impact. Time to reassure here. So, I mean, I think here the best way forward is remembering this quote from Jerry Daykin, who's a media agency leader. Our media investments shape the world around us, right? As long as we keep that in mind, we're going to be in a good place. Once again, it's a mindset. Support the kind of media that you want to see more of, right? That's really it. A great resource for this issue is the Conscious Ad Network. It's an industry body out of the United Kingdom that is a coalition of advertisers and some agencies basically working on making sure that ethics are catching up with tech in modern advertising. And they've written these manifestos about, what is the best path forward in the face of all some of these issues that we've talked about today, like informed consent and hate speech and fake news. So I really recommend checking their site out, the Conscious Ad Network, sharing it with your colleagues. I think their perspective is really valuable. And a more tactical tip is build an inclusion list, right? Think about your brand, the kind of media you want to see, the kind of media where you think your brand belongs, and build up a list of those great places and use that in your media planning and buying. And then if you are doing automated buying, think about brand safety protocols, right? Basically, don't just tell the pipes to buy what's cheap. Tell the pipes to buy something that's going to keep your brand safe and not fund some kind of destructive content that you don't want to be associated with. So I think that's a great tip there too. I love this company called Check My Ads. They are a consulting firm that just focus on this, essentially keeping your brand away from all that scary bad stuff. And they publish an email newsletter called Branded, which I'm a fan of, and I encourage you guys to subscribe. It's really a great read. Okay, privacy, some tips on privacy. Well, the Conscious Ad Network also do some great writing in this area. Their point really is it's about being customer-centric, respecting people, and shifting the mindset. I think I'm running a little low on time, so I'm going to speed up. I would say the fourth tech titan we haven't talked about is Jeff Bezos. He has always been customer-driven and customer-obsessed. I think following his example will do great things for us. And we as marketers are good at this. It's our superpower. We obsess over our guests, our customers. We're empathetic. We strive to connect. So just remember that advertising is part of the customer experience and make the whole experience great. And don't compromise if you don't have to. I think sometimes we think we need to sacrifice and be a little bit annoying to be effective, but it's not always true. The path of wisdom and the path of balance is really about following those customers. So I think it's that customer-centric mindset that won't do you wrong. Remember, you're not following tech, you're following customers. Final tip, don't go it alone. Once you have a strategy in place, There's strength in numbers. DBC have some tremendous resources here on their website. The Tourism Digital Academy, for example, is an 8-week set of workshops, very deep. Destination Canada similarly have tremendous resources. The American Marketing Association's BC chapter, Brain Station, where you or your staff can get schooled on digital. My company has a newsletter. There are lots of, you don't have to go it alone. There are lots of great sources of information like this event. So thank you for your time. Best of luck out there. You can do it.
Thank you so much, John. That session was extremely engaging, and we really appreciate your time today. And thank you again, Maya, for joining us as well. I know we didn't get any time to go through any of the questions today, but we will post all of the questions and answers up on the website. And also feel free to visit COVID-19 response at destinationbc.ca, and you can email any additional questions in there as well. We, again, really appreciate you being here, John. It was a very, very insightful workshop for us today.
My pleasure.
And then we do have our next workshop beginning in about 14 minutes. So we do look forward to